This is the Bringing Business to Retail podcast, and today I'm going to share with you some really interesting stats that I found that I believe as an independent retail or e-commerce store owner, you can't afford to ignore. Welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast, where I, Salena Knight, share strategies, interview retail revolutionaries, and delve into the minds of e-commerce experts to help you grow a profitable, independent retail or e-commerce business. If you're stuck in a rut, or if you feel like business is way harder than it should be, or you've overachieved all of the things that you've set out to and are wondering what to do next, or how do I even make this better, I know that you're going to love today's episode. If you're stuck in a rut, feel like business is way harder than it should be, or you've achieved all of the things that you set out to and are wondering what next, or how do I even make this better, then I know that you're going to love today's episode. Hey there, and thanks for tuning in for today's episode. Over the last few weeks, I've made the decision to kind of tune out as much as possible from what's going on in the media. I am pretty confident that I can follow what's going on based on what my neighbor tells me or what my husband tells me, or just those bits and pieces that you happen to grab here and there. Maybe it's when you first turn the TV on or you first put the radio on in the car. But I'm not normally an anxious person, and I found myself just falling into that negativity vortex, just spending hours reading news sites for information that was no different to what it was an hour ago. So I made the decision pretty early on in the piece not to get caught up in it. And look, that works for me. It may not work for you. But I was on social media the other day and I read this story about a guy in our Airbnb hosts group who had spent the last 3 or 4 years building up a business to help co-host Airbnb properties. And he was finally got to the point where he was able to pay himself a wage. I think he had 1 or 2 people working with him, and he felt like he'd finally gotten to the point where the business was taking off. Now, as you can probably imagine, this has hit him really hard. All of a sudden, he has no bookings. There are very few people who need his services at the moment because most of those Airbnb type properties aren't allowed to be leased out. And what makes it even worse is he doesn't know when it's going to end. For me, this is totally heartbreaking, and I know that it's happening to so many businesses out there. But I do not want this to happen to you. So this week I held a live masterclass showing you how to choose what you should be focusing right now. And there were some really great questions. I did a Q&A at the end. There were great questions. People from New Zealand saying, what do I do? Because I've had to completely shut down. I was talking to one of the retailer associations in the chat and giving some examples of how retailers can stay in business right now. The feedback I got from the people who attended was that it was gold. It was so helpful and everything was easily implementable. So I'm going to be holding it again next week, totally free and 100% live. If you are struggling right now and you want some help on where you should be focusing your energies, because it's really easy to want to do 20 different things, or on the flip side, do nothing at all. Come along and hang out with me and hear what I have to say. Even if it's just one thing that you take away that you can put in place in your business to help you focus and move forward during this time, that would be amazing. So head over to salenaknight.com/focus and you can grab a spot. As I said, totally free, 100% live. I'll be doing a Q&A after the presentation, after I walk through everything. And if you have specific questions about your business, I'm more than happy to answer them so that you can be prepared. That's what this is about. It's being prepared, having a plan in place, and knowing that you still have to be nimble, which is the perfect segue into today's episode. Because when you're running a business, it can be difficult to decide what to focus on. And if you are anything like most retail and e-commerce store owners that I talk to, believe me, you are not alone, your to-do list never ends. I put a post up on Facebook, just as an aside, last week on my Winning Wednesday post inside the Retail Academy, that I crossed off everything on my to-do list that was important. Sure, there are other things on there that I would like to do, but everything that was important, I'd finally caught up with, and it was so fantastic. But that to-do list isn't ever going to end. There's always going to be stuff that you're going to want to do to grow your business. But I don't know about you, but I feel like every single day it seems to bring something new to focus on. Every single day something comes up that needs to go onto that to-do list. Every podcast you listen to and every newsletter that drops into your inbox can make you feel like you have to drag yourself in 100 different ways. Am I right? True story, I used to listen to podcasts on my way into the store, and my team would literally groan. I'm not joking. They would physically groan when I'd walk in, because I always would. I'd say hello, and then the first thing that I would generally start the conversation with was, I was listening to this podcast this morning. And when they heard that, they knew that this was the preface to some amazing thing that I wanted to do, or some fantastic thing I wanted to implement into the business. Now, I'll admit, 9 times out of 10, what I wanted to do was highly valid. But you just can't decide to implement something new every day. Putting processes in place, installing new technology, changing out the way that you do things, that takes time. And there is always going to be that messy in-between period, that changeover period, where everybody has to settle into a new way of doing things or learning a new piece of technology. So what ends up happening, and as I said, this is in my experience, is one of two things. One, as the business owner, you believe that no one else can do anything as well as you, so you take it upon yourself to be the doer of all things, to implement this new strategy, this new process, this new piece of tech, and be the master of nothing. You are making yourself busy for the sake of being busy, because you believe that no one else can do it as well as you. And I'm going to be honest here and say that mentality is never going to see you scale your business. You will always be held back. And I've seen business owners who are doing $7, $8, $9, $10 million who are still meddling in the business, as I like to call it. You have to focus, you have to have goals, you have to take specific action to see results, and you can't do it alone. The second thing that happens if you don't take it all on yourself as the owner is that you get your team to implement it. But they don't know where the priorities lie. They don't know if they're supposed to drop what they're doing and implement this thing for you, or research it, or just think about it. And if we do go ahead and implement it, they don't know what the benchmarks are. And as a result, you're actually creating this culture, this workplace environment where your staff love you and they want to do everything to help the business survive, but they're confused, they're overwhelmed, they're stressed out, and they don't feel good in themselves because they're not working at their best level. Maybe you're asking them to do something that they're just not even good at. And as a result, you're dropping their self-esteem down. Now, nobody wants that in their business, right? You don't want unhappy team members, because when you have unhappy team members, you have unhappy customers. And when you have unhappy either of those things, you are generally unhappy. And that's not what this is about. Now, just changing track a little bit, have I ever told you the story about when I walked into my store one Saturday morning, because I always used to get there early and just, I don't even know what I used to do when I got there early, but I would go and have a cup of tea and do whatever it was I was doing. But this day was different. I walked in the door, and as I opened the door, you could go, we sort of had a T-shaped shop, so you could go left or right. And I walked in around to the right, and I don't know, something just hit me. And I looked at all of the stock on the shelves, and I realized that if I sold everything in my store that day, if by some miracle I managed to clear out every piece of stock, by the time I paid all of my bills and loans and outgoings and all those kinds of things, I'd only have a few $1,000s left. And at that moment, I realized that I had absolutely no handle on the stats in my business. And look, I was all over profit margin, I was all over revenue, I was even all over conversion rate. But I wasn't taking things like stock rotation into account or the cost of acquiring a customer. or my customer lifetime value. There were so many things that I didn't even know that I didn't know. Now, you would think they would teach you this stuff in business school, right? But I didn't learn it. Maybe it's changed now, but I spent 6 years studying for a degree in business and they didn't teach me any of this stuff. So when you have one of those breakthrough moments, things change. They call it the breakdown before the breakthrough because that's usually what happens. You usually hit your lowest point. And I remember that day sitting in the stockroom, bawling my eyes out and just thinking, why do I bother? But I don't know, guys, I don't know about you, but we entrepreneurs, we have this drive. We want more from life. We want to make things better. We want to make our lives better. We want to make people happy. And so after my little cry fest, I made myself a cup of tea, I ate a chocolate biscuit, and I decided that things had to change. Have you ever heard of Pearson's Law? Now, I didn't even know this was a thing until I Googled it, and sure enough, it is. It's called Pearson's Law. And Pearson's Law states that when performance is measured, performance improves. So when performance is measured and reported back, the rate of improvement accelerates. So what does that mean? Well, that what is measured improves, and it'll improve faster when you actually measure it and report it back somewhere. So with that in mind, I do have a download for you, and I haven't done a download for quite a few episodes now, but I want to give you my retail metrics tracker. It's a really helpful but pretty comprehensive tracker which will help you to keep tabs on what's working in your sales, your revenue, your marketing, and your advertising, all at the tip of your fingers. So you can grab that over at salenaknight.com/metrics. salenaknight.com/metrics, and you can have that for free. So let's jump into the stats that I want to share with you. And these probably aren't the stats that you were expecting from me, but I'm going to ease in gently with stat number 1, which is conversion rate on bricks and mortar stores is around 10 to 15%, and online it's around 2 to 3%. Now, I actually found that stat quite interesting because I thought that, and maybe it's just because I work with independent retailers, so I find that your conversion rates are higher, but this is an average number from right through from big corporate stores right down to small business. Not that I ever like the word small, but conversion rate is 10 to 15%. I thought it was about 30%. So this means that for every 100 people who walk in your doors, you're probably looking at around 10 to 15 sales. And online, for every 100 people who visit your website, you're looking at 2 to 3 sales. So that tells you that you need a lot of people visiting your site or coming into your store to actually make money, right? So is conversion rate something that you are currently measuring? Do you know how your store compares to other people in your industry? Now, if you are off to a great start. You get like a great big gold star thumbs up from Sal. But if not, then your first step is to start keeping track. Remember the Pearson effect. That which is measured improves. And like I mentioned before, I've got that free download for you over at salenaknight.com/metrics, where you can start doing this straight away. Start keeping track. You have to know your numbers, and once you do, then you can devise a plan. And your money pillar is one of the 5 core pillars of retail success. And your money pillar revolves around understanding how money flows into and out of your business. Once you've got a handle on this, then you can start to put your resources into the weakest pillar. But if you don't have a handle on your money pillar, you aren't going to be able to measure the effectiveness of any other actions that you take. The money pillar is the foundation of your retail or e-commerce business. It is the one that if you don't understand, you aren't ever going to be highly profitable. So once you've identified all of that, once you've started doing the tracking, then you can move on to the next pillar of weakness. Now, it generally tends to be the sales pillar, right? What's stopping your customers from getting over the line? Why aren't they spending their money with you? Now, in store, you could look at how your sales associates are interacting with your customers? Do they need to get some help? Do you need to get some training for them? One of the reasons I love tracking conversion rate is because it is a number that every single salesperson has control over. It is your job as the business owner or your marketing person's job to drive the traffic to the website or to your store. But the people who are there, the front-facing, your customer assistance people, your people on chat, those people are responsible for making the sale. So you have to invest in them if you want them to make you money. And think about online. Whether you've got a bricks and mortar store and an online store, or whether you're pure play e-commerce, how can you be providing more of an in-store experience? And realistically, there are so many ways to do that these days. I recently purchased new glasses, like spectacles, purely online, having never tried them on. And the process was quite simple. I mean, it was a little bit detailed. I had to go and look at my existing glasses, and it showed me how to read the measurements, and then I had to measure my pupil distance if I didn't already know that. But they had like a virtual face try on where you took a picture of yourself and then it put the glasses onto your face virtually. So you could get a pretty good impression of what they were going to look like. And if you didn't like it, you could just send them back and have another pair sent to you. So how are you, if you're pure play e-commerce or you're omni-channel, how are you bringing that in-store experience online for your customers? I know in our physical stores, we had a target of, you're probably going to be scared here now, but a target conversion rate of 60%. And I know it sounds high compared to that 10 to 15 and even to 30%, but when you're a destination store in a niche market, people are specifically coming to buy. We knew that if people had made the effort to come to our store because we were the only people who stocked so many of the things in real life, then we had a really good chance of converting them. So I want you to look at your stats and see what your stats are for your business. Don't worry about 10 to 15% or 2 to 3%. You need to be better than that. You need to be better than the industry average. If your conversion rate is 60%, let's go for 65. Let's go for 70. You've got to have those goals so that you can take specific action. Because if your staff and yourself, your team, don't know what to focus on, then they go back to what I was saying earlier about being confused and overwhelmed and not feeling great about coming to work because they don't feel confident in themselves. Okay, so on to the next stat. This one surprised me until I did some research, and I'm going to share with you how I did that research. So the stat is 25% of your database, your email database, will drop off, disengage, or just tune out over the course of a year. That is scary, isn't it? A quarter of the people who've said that they want to interact with you just aren't going to be bothered. You're being shown the hand, you're being told whatevs, but you've spent a lot of time and money and effort to get that person onto your database. Now, your customer database is the lifeblood of your business. You've already spent that money to acquire them, and hopefully you're doing a really good job on nurturing them. Because you already know that it's more expensive to find a new customer and to go through that customer journey than it is to just sell to somebody who's already bought from you before. It's easy. So with that in mind, what are you doing to keep those customers engaged? And more importantly, are you actually analysing the data, or data as my American friends like to call it, and running campaigns that reflect what the data is telling you? And I'm just going to pop in another call to action here. Download the metrics tracker and you'll be able to do all of this inside of it. But you know what I find really interesting is that it is easy to think that seven-figure business owners, so people who are doing millions and millions of dollars, have all their ducks in a row, right? We can look at these businesses and they seem to be doing everything right. But I'm telling you right now, I've worked with a lot of retail and e-commerce store owners who are doing mid to high seven figures, And what surprises me over and over and over again is how some of the simplest, in my opinion, simplest things are overlooked. It is not uncommon for me to start auditing one of these businesses that from the outside look like they have it all going on, to find that they don't even email their customers on a regular basis, or they don't have their customer journey mapped out, or they have no abandoned cart sequence or retargeting emails in place. I mean, like I said, I consider these retail 101, like the basics of having a retail or e-commerce business. But every business owner has an area of strength and an area of weakness. That place of the weakness is that place where all those things fall between the cracks. I'm going to be honest and say, for me, that is Instagram. So now sometimes it might be marketing, sometimes it might be your customer acquisition or retention, but email marketing is virtually free. This is what I don't understand. You pay your monthly subscription, and for most people, it's going to be less than a couple of $100s, and you can generate customers, you can engage with your customers, and you can make sales. A lot of it you can do on autopilot, all for nothing. Once you pay that fee, you're not limited on how many emails you can send. But here's the tricky part, right? It's not just about emailing for the sake of emailing, is it? The stat that I was just talking about is that 25% of your database will drop out, disengage, or tune out over the course of a year. A quarter of those people. So what we're talking about here is engaging your customers. And you know what? I reckon that stat is probably relevant for your customer database inside of your point of sale as well. If you aren't an e-commerce business, I reckon there's a really good chance that stat would be very, very similar to your in-store customer database. So when you talk to them, you have to engage them. You have to get them to the point where they want to open your emails. And the story I was going to tell you about how we measured this and how I discovered that we are in that average is this is something that we do monitor in our business. And every week we look at engagement rates, we look at open rates, we look at click-through rates. We see who our top email openers are. We've implemented segmenting, and I've talked about this on the past. Because the people who are engaged, we send them more emails. We want to keep them engaged. We don't just want to send them one email a week. Our highly engaged people on our customer database get 2 to 3, based on what they like, emails a week. And they love reading them. That's why they're highly engaged. If we have a point where people become unengaged, so on our segmenting, that's after 3 months. If they haven't opened an email for 3 months, we put them through a re-engagement campaign. We ask them, what do they want to hear about? Are they still interested? Because to be fair, customers have a life cycle and maybe they're just not interested anymore. If that's the case, it is okay to just let them go with love. It's not about you, it's about them. You're just not compatible anymore, and that's okay. Everybody changes in life. But what's probably the most important thing to remember is that for customers to engage with you and your business, you have to engage with them. Okay, speaking of engagement, actually it's got nothing to do with engagement really, but my next stat that I want to share with you, it's my last stat for this episode, is, and this is quite scary, and actually given that I come from a sustainability background, it actually breaks my heart. And that is that dead inventory costs, and I only have a stat here for the US, but it costs US retailers $50 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars every single year. And globally, there are more than $4 trillion worth of assets that are just sitting there lying idle, that are sitting in stock rooms, sitting on shelves, and nobody is using them. Now, I love a good charity store, or as you Americans like to call it, thrift store adventure. Elizabeth and I, we are constantly buying each other things from charity stores. And there's the thrill of the chase, right? You go to the thrift store with absolutely no expectations. The thrill that you get comes from rummaging through the racks, from the highs and lows of finding something beautiful and then realizing it's not your size. Or finding the perfect top and then realizing that it's got a hole in it. And even the curiosity that comes when you find the perfect Lululemon tank top with the tag still attached and you think, why the heck did somebody give this thing away? But that feeling that you get, and I don't know, if you're not a thrift storer, maybe you don't get this, but the feeling that you get when you find the perfect thing and you look at the tag and it's like $6. I mean, maybe it's just the bargain hunter in me, but I love that feeling. So, extra fun fact, resale is growing at a rate 21 times faster than the retail apparel industry. Now, a few weeks ago, I posted a live episode from Yasmin Grigalunas about how her organization, the world's biggest garage sale, is taking this idle stock, this $4 trillion worth of global idle assets. Now, she's not taking them from all over the world just yet, but she's taking this stock. She is selling it. She's giving it a new lease of life. And then she's taking the proceeds and supporting charities with it. These are products, stock, inventory that would otherwise be sitting idle in a warehouse. I mean, she opened up a whole pop-up shop with thousands and thousands of pairs of shoes that had been returned from Shoes of Prey. Now, they probably weren't ever going to get sold. They were just going to end up in landfill. But this super smart lady saw that all this stuff is sitting in the background, just waiting to find new homes. And she's not the only one. There is a fantastic company called Good 360, and they ensure that the right products are delivered to the right people at the right time during disaster recovery. So they work with big organizations and take this excess stock. For example, they took a whole bunch of backpacks from Williams-Sonoma and they donated them to a charity. So all their charity partners are highly screened, but they find out what people need and then they have the stock that the stores need to get rid of that's just lying there idle, and they team those up. They get the right products to the right people when they need it. So this could be personal care items, it could be appliances, it could be hardware materials. Like, there are some amazing case studies on their website, but all this stuff is just sitting in warehouses, just collecting dust. And I want you to think about that in your business. Think about all the stock that is just sitting idle on your shelves, that is sitting in a storeroom, in a box, in a warehouse. What's going to happen to it? One of the simplest ways that I actually make my one-on-one clients money, you're going to just be kicking yourself, right? One of the simplest ways I make them money is just by selling off all that stock that they have been hoarding. The stuff that is not quite perfect, the one-offs, the last ofs, the stuff that maybe went a little bit out of fashion. Maybe it was a trending thing. Remember kinetic sand, anyone? Those sorts of products. The funny thing is, this is not a monetary thing. It is a psychological issue. Psychological obstacle, maybe not an issue, a psychological obstacle that business owners have. We struggle with letting go of stock for less than we paid for it. So rather than actually sell it for less than we paid for it, we'll just let it sit on the shelf until the next season. But this is where you have to understand money in your business. This is where the money pillar comes in. You have to understand this concept of opportunity cost in business. So every day that one item, or 10 or 15 or 50 items, is sitting on your shelf, not being sold, it is costing you money. You probably think it's not because you've already paid for it, but I promise you, it is costing you money. Because every time it doesn't sell, I know it's a bit of a double negative, but every time it doesn't sell, you have no money to buy more stock. I had one retailer, and she knows who she is, she's probably listening to the podcast, who sold off hundreds of items at $5, well below what she paid for them, just to get rid of it. And it was a super scary place to be in the beginning. And that is totally understandable. It's easy to think that your customers might get the wrong idea, or they might even think you're going out of business. I did an episode, I'll link to this into the show notes. I did an episode last year about how premium brands can have sales for Black Friday without compromising their brand. And as I said, I'll link to that into the show notes. But you can't have this stock sitting on your shelf. You are much better to get $5 for that dusty old pair of shoes and then go and buy something else with it that you can make money from than just leave it in your stockroom. And I have to say, I see this happen time and time again with Christmas stock. So all Christmas related or seasonally related, Thanksgiving, Halloween, you just put it away until next year. But think about that. Think about if you sold that today, let's call it for $5. If you sold it today for $5, how many times could you go on to reuse that $5? This is you tackling your money pillar. So over $4 trillion of stock sits idle globally. And that number is obscene. Why? Why is it just sitting there doing nothing? It is time to ditch this scarcity mindset and move that stock along to somebody else who will enjoy it, regardless of what you sell it for. You're going to feel better knowing that you've got some cash in the bank that you can use to buy stock that sells. You've made someone's day by finding them a bargain, and you have had an impact on the planet by reducing landfill. And that's something we all need to think about, isn't it? What are you doing to reduce your business impact on the earth? How is your business contributing to landfill? Or not contributing, as the case may be. Every little bit helps. Now, before I wrap up, as I said, it's over and over again, it's really important to understand the stats, but you need to understand which stats are important for your business right now. So if you haven't already, I want you to take my quiz to work out what you actually need to focus on versus what you think you need to focus on, and then find the stats, the facts, the figures, the industry averages, and educate yourself and understand which numbers are relevant for the goals that you've put in place for your business. So once you've done that, so this is a 2-step action process today. Do the quiz if you haven't already, and then go and grab my free metrics tracker, because it is a really comprehensive document that is going to help you keep tabs on what's working and what isn't in your sales, your revenue, your marketing, your advertising. It's going to all be there at the tip of your fingers. Remember, Pearson's law states that when performance is measured, performance improves. And when performance is measured and reported back to somebody, the rate of improvement accelerates. So, 2-step process for today. If you haven't already taken the quiz, head over to salenaknight.com/quiz, or just go to the front page of the website. There's a great big button there. Work out which core pillar of retail success you need to focus on. And then, or if you've already done the quiz, head over to salenaknight.com/metrics and get that free comprehensive tracker. Okay, that's a wrap for this episode. You guys have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here, same time, same place, for the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. Oh, just quickly, P.S. If you haven't already, I would love it if you could leave a review over on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever it is that you listen to the podcast, because that's one of the metrics that I am focusing on tracking right now. I would be super grateful if you could just take 2 minutes out of your day to let me know what you think of the podcast. Thanks so much. See you again next week. Bye. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You can find all of the show notes over at salenaknight.com. If you found something that you heard today particularly useful, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And of course, feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit by listening to it. Want more retail biz strategies? You can watch the Bringing Business to Retail TV show, where each week I'll answer a question or provide you with a simple, actionable retail biz strategy that you can implement in your business right away. If you have a question or a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Drop my team an email at podcast@salenaknight.com, and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week.